The American Revolution. Following an 8-year conflict, the 13 American colonies gained their freedom from British rule and went on to found the United States of America. We would have to go back to the 7 Years' War to provide some background, as the British government was heavily indebted as a result of their victory against France. Since their establishment in the 16th century, the American colonies have been mainly left to their own devices. The colonists, who were angry about not having a voice in the British Parliament and wanted equal rights with other British subjects, fiercely protested the British attempts to tax them in order to raise money. In 1717, as a result of colonial resistance, there was bloodshed when British soldiers opened fire during the Boston Massacre, killing 5 men. 3 years later, in what is known as the Boston Tea Party, citizens of Boston boarded British ships and emptied their tea cargo into Boston Harbor in protest of British taxes. A number of punitive measures were passed by the incensed British Parliament with the intention of regaining control over Massachusetts. In response, a group of colonial delegates, which included Washington, John, and Samuel Adams, gathered in Philadelphia to protest unrepresentative taxes and the British Army's continued presence in the colonies without their approval. However, they refrained from calling for the colonies' independence. The Revolutionary War began when local militias in Massachusetts engaged in combat with British soldiers in April 1775. Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson were among the new members of the Second Continental Congress, which met in Philadelphia and chose Washington to lead the formation of the Continental Army and supervise the conquest of Boston. The risks of the war caused American enthusiasm to gradually fade, and colonies were forced to use land bounties and cash incentives to recruit soldiers, most of whom were young, inexperienced men from impoverished backgrounds. The Congress's decision to convert the Continental Army from a volunteer and 1-year enlistment force to a standing army of soldiers performing long-term service was a pivotal decision in the American Revolution. Additionally, starting in 1778, African Americans were recruited by the Continental Army, a move initially prohibited by Congress. Even though the British won the first significant battle of the Revolution, the American forces, lacking in experience, dealt the British heavy casualties at the Battle of Bunker Hill, which greatly bolstered the revolutionary cause. The majority of Americans had begun to support independence by 1776, and on July 4th, the Continental Congress voted to adopt the Declaration of Independence, which was primarily written by Thomas Jefferson and was drafted by a 5-person committee that also included John Adams and Franklin. Public support for independence was greatly increased by Thomas Paine's widely distributed pamphlet Common Sense. Washington had to flee to New York when the British government dispatched a sizable fleet and 34,000 soldiers there in the same month. After being forced across the Delaware River, Washington surprised everyone by attacking Trenton and then triumphing once more at Princeton, which caused the rebels' expectations to be revised. The American victory at Saratoga, led by General Gates, was one of the pivotal moments in the American Revolution and led to France openly siding with the United States, after France and Spain joined the colonies in their opposition to Britain, to which they had bitterly lost territory. At the end of the 7 Years' War, the American Revolution had turned into a global conflict. The American troops withdrew after the British Army captured Philadelphia, and they profited immensely from the French discipline and training. The British focused on the South, and at first won several notable victories, thereafter failing to put an end to the uprising in New England. However, a combined Franco-American land and naval campaign in 1781 forced the British to surrender at Yorktown, Virginia, because a French fleet hindered their ability to evacuate or send reinforcements. The American Revolution was essentially over with the siege of Yorktown, and 2 years later, the United States of America became the first country to gain independence from the British colonial empire when Britain recognized it at the Treaty of Paris. 30 years after Britain's election as the country's first president, the U.S. and Britain would again clash in the War of 1812. In addition to abolishing the formal nobility and granting daughters and widows equal inheritance rights, The American Revolution brought about some other radical changes, like the replacement of the imperial monarchy with an elected, kingless government system. Conversely, slaves, who made up as much as 30% of the American populace, were viewed as property and were not treated equally with white people. Moreover, white men without sufficient property were not allowed to vote, nor could women. If you like the video, subscribe the channel and press bell icon. Thank you for watching.